You've been lied to about life. They told you that peace comes from control, from having the perfect plan, from making sure nothing ever goes wrong. But if that were true, why do people who try to control everything still feel anxious? Why do you still feel restless, waking up at night with thoughts spinning, afraid of the future, stuck in the loop of what if? The truth is, the universe was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be trusted. And Buddhism holds the map. For centuries, the wisest teachers Buddha, Nagarjuna, Zen masters have whispered the same truth. That letting go is not weakness, it's power. That surrender is not giving up, it's waking up. That when you stop fighting life, life starts carrying you. Tonight, as you listen to these lessons, something inside you will shift. The tightness in your chest will begin to loosen. The noise in your mind will grow softer, like waves calming after a storm. And a deep knowing will rise. The universe is not against you, it is holding you. When you wake up tomorrow, you'll feel it. Lighter, clearer, more alive. Not because the world changed, but because you finally trusted it. This is not just another sleep story. This is a journey back to your true nature, calm, open, free. Are you ready to let go and fall into the arms of the universe? Let's begin. You've just felt the invitation to let go, to stop fighting against life, and begin trusting the universe. Before we step deeper, let me tell you something that might stir something inside of you. The very thing you've been clinging to for safety, the idea of control, is the very thing that has been keeping you in chains. The thought that if you could only manage every detail, predict every outcome, or hold on tightly enough, you would finally feel safe. It's a lie. And Buddhism reveals why this illusion not only exhausts us, but also blinds us from the freedom already waiting beneath the surface. Tonight, we're going to sink into the lesson of emptiness, a truth that transforms fear into strength and control into harmony. In Buddhism, there is a teaching called shunyata, often translated as emptiness. To many people, the word sounds frightening. Emptiness feels like loss, like nothingness, like a void that swallows meaning. But that isn't what it means here. Emptiness in Buddhism is not about absence, it's about freedom. It is the recognition that everything you cling to as solid and permanent is actually fluid, shifting, interconnected. The job, the relationship, the identity, even the thoughts that race through your head, all of them lack fixed, independent existence. They are not under your ultimate control. And here lies the secret. Once you see this, instead of panic, you discover peace. Think about it. When you believe life is something you can control, every moment becomes a battlefield. You wake up already tense, worrying about whether things will go the way you planned. The traffic, the weather, your health, the behavior of others, so much lies outside your hands. Yet you carry the burden as if you could bend reality to your will. No wonder you feel drained. But when you see the emptiness of control, you stop demanding the universe to fit your design. You begin to flow with it instead of against it. This doesn't mean you become passive or careless. Quite the opposite. By releasing the illusion of control, your actions become clearer, wiser, more effective. Picture a sailor on the sea. The waves and wind are never under the sailor's command. No amount of shouting or grasping can stop a storm. But by accepting that truth, by studying the currents, raising the sails, and learning to adjust, the sailor moves with power and grace. This is the strength that comes from surrender. You are no longer paralyzed by fear of the uncontrollable. You become skillful in response to it. Buddhism teaches that clinging to control is a form of ignorance, because it assumes the self is separate from the rest of existence. When you believe I must control the world, you create a split that doesn't actually exist. Shunyata shows that both I and the world are empty of fixed identity. They arise together, shaped by countless conditions. You breathe because the trees produce oxygen. You live because countless ancestors survived before you. Even your thoughts are influenced by languages you didn't invent and cultures you didn't create. Control becomes impossible once you see how vast the web of causes truly island. And yet, here is the gift. When control dissolves, interconnection appears. Instead of a hostile universe to be managed, you meet a living field of cooperation. Suddenly, letting go is not defeat but alignment. You can trust that the same intelligence that allows seeds to sprout and rivers to carve valleys is also moving through your life. You do not have to force the river to flow. You only need to stop building dams in your mind. This insight transforms the way you hold challenges. Think about moments of loss, the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, the collapse of plans you cherished. Normally, the instinct is to fight, to grip tighter, to rage at life for not going your way. But in emptiness, you see that nothing was ever yours to own. The relationship, the job, the plan they were, conditions that arose, flourished for a time, and passed when causes changed. When you stop calling that a failure, you see it for what it is, the dance of conditions. One door closes, and another quietly opens. When you stop clinging, you start seeing. Modern psychology touches the same truth. Studies on resilience show that people who accept uncertainty and loosen their grip on control experience less anxiety and greater well-being. Their minds adapt more quickly because they are not wasting energy resisting what cannot be changed. They resemble the bamboo in the wind, flexible, rooted, unbroken. Buddhism revealed this centuries ago. Clinging breeds suffering, but letting go allows life to carry you. You may wonder, but if I surrender control, won't I lose my power? That fear is natural, yet it arises from misunderstanding. Surrender doesn't strip you of power. It reveals where true power comes from. Consider how much energy you burn in endless worry, rehearsing scenarios in your head that never happen. That energy is wasted. But when you surrender the fight to control outcomes, your energy is freed to act where it truly matters in the present moment, with the resources available, in harmony with what island. The result is not weakness, but effectiveness. There's also a deeper shift here. Surrendering control reshapes how you relate to yourself. Many of us live with harsh inner voices, criticizing every mistake, demanding perfection. These voices arise because we believe we must control not just life, but ourselves completely. When you fail to meet those impossible standards, guilt and shame flood in. But when you understand emptiness, you see that even the self is not a fixed object to control. Your thoughts, moods, and behaviors are conditions arising and passing. Instead of self-hatred, compassion arises. You treat yourself not as a broken machine to fix, but as a living process to care for. Buddhist teachers often point to the breath as a lesson in this. You cannot force the breath to always be deep or perfect. The body breathes on its own, whether you think about it or not. But you can meet the breath with awareness. You can allow it. You can ride its rhythm. In the same way, you don't command the universe, but you can live in tune with it. Breathing becomes a metaphor for surrender, each inhale taken as a gift, each exhale as a letting go. Another layer of this lesson is trust. Control is rooted in distrust, the belief that if you let go, everything will collapse. But emptiness reveals that things are already supported by countless causes. The sun rises without your effort. The earth spins without your command. Your heart beats without your permission. Trust grows when you notice how much is already being carried for you. The practice becomes less about making things happen and more about allowing life to unfold. This shift from control to trust also changes relationships. Think of how often conflict arises because one person tries to control another, wanting them to act, think, or feel a certain way. Control breeds resentment. But when you release the need to control others, you create space for genuine connection. You can listen without an agenda, love without chains, and respect the unfolding of another person's path. Relationships breathe when control ends. On a larger scale, this teaching frees you from the fear of uncertainty. Life will always be unpredictable, full of sudden turns. Trying to hold certainty is like trying to grip water. It slips through no matter how tight you clutch. Emptiness shows that uncertainty is not a flaw, but the natural state of existence. Once you stop fearing it, uncertainty becomes a field of possibility. Instead of asking, "What if it goes wrong?" you begin to ask, "What if something new emerges?" Surrender transforms fear into curiosity. Spiritual traditions across the world echo this truth, but Buddhism places it at the heart. By realizing shunyata, you stop clinging to false ground. And strangely, when the ground disappears, you don't fall, you float. Freedom arises not from standing on solid certainty, but from moving lightly on shifting ground. In this way, surrender does not mean defeat, but liberation. The lesson becomes even more profound when applied to suffering. Pain is part of life. This is undeniable. But much of our suffering comes from trying to control pain, to push it away or demand it vanish. Yet emptiness teaches that pain, like all things, is impermanent. When you stop fighting it and allow it to rise and fall, suffering lessens. Your mind no longer adds the weight of resistance to the raw sensation. You discover that acceptance can feel lighter than struggle. This is not resignation, it is wisdom. It is saying yes to life as it is, not as you wish it to be. From this yes, new possibilities emerge, creativity flows, compassion deepens, presence sharpens. You are no longer consumed by the battle to control, and so you can finally participate fully in living. Great masters have always pointed to this. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's there are few." Control tries to force one outcome, emptiness opens to many. By letting go, you create space for miracles small and large that control would have crushed. This lesson is not only philosophical but practical. You can begin to practice it now in small ways. When plans shift unexpectedly, notice the instinct to resist. Instead of tightening, soften. Ask, what else is possible here? When anxiety rises, see if it comes from trying to control what is beyond you. If so, release it back to the universe. When anger burns, check if it's fueled by unmet expectations of control. If so, breathe and let those expectations dissolve. Over time, this practice rewires your mind. The habit of grasping weakens, and the habit of flowing strengthens. As this deepens, you begin to feel a paradoxical kind of power. The less you try to control, the more aligned you feel. Life moves more smoothly, not because circumstances are perfect, but because you stopped fighting them. The current carries you, instead of exhausting you. This is why surrender strengthens power, because it frees you from wasting energy where it cannot be spent, and channels it where it truly matters into presence, compassion, wisdom, and action. So tonight, as you listen and as you rest, let this truth settle inside you. The emptiness of control is not a threat, but a doorway. It is the end of exhaustion and the beginning of harmony. Each moment you release the grip, you feel lighter. Each time you surrender, you discover strength you didn't know was there. You are not falling into nothing, you are falling into everything. And the universe, vast and timeless, is already holding you. When you begin to see the emptiness of control, a new question quietly rises. If nothing is fixed, if every moment is fluid and dependent on conditions, then how does anything hold together? What keeps life from becoming meaningless chaos? This is where another teaching enters, like a hidden thread running through the fabric of existence, karma. But karma is not what most people think. It is not a cosmic jailer waiting to punish, nor a rigid chain dragging you from one life to the next. Karma is a web, subtle and alive, weaving every thought, word, and action into a tapestry of interconnection. When you understand this, trust in the universe deepens, because you realize you are never a powerless victim of fate. You are a participant in creation itself. Karma, in its true sense, simply means action. Every movement of body, speech, or mind sets conditions into motion. These conditions ripple outward, touching countless lives, and eventually circle back in forms we often cannot predict. The teaching is not about judgment, but about cause and effect, about the way reality unfolds. If you throw a seed into the soil, it does not become a stone, it becomes a plant in its time. If you speak with kindness, the energy of kindness reverberates, shaping both the listener and yourself. If you act with cruelty, the same is true. Karma is not a punishment from outside, but the natural unfolding of interdependent causes. This is where the metaphor of the web reveals its power. Think of a spider's web glistening in the morning dew. Each strand connects to others, and when one part trembles, the vibration travels across the whole. Karma functions like this. Your choices never exist in isolation. The words you say to a friend echo in their heart, perhaps affecting how they treat the next person they meet. A single gesture of generosity may ripple into countless unseen benefits. In the same way, careless words can wound more deeply than you know, sending ripples far beyond your sight. The reason this understanding builds trust is because it shows life is not random. Even when things appear chaotic, there is always a web of causes weaving what unfolds. You may not see every thread, but the patterns are there. Trust is not blind faith. It is the recognition that your actions matter. That meaning is born from interconnection. In this way, karma reveals the universe not as a cold machine, but as a living system in which your participation is essential. There is also freedom hidden here. If karma were a chain, binding you to past mistakes with no release, life would feel hopeless. But the Buddha emphasized that karma is dynamic, always moving. What you did in the past conditions the present, yes, but the present moment holds infinite new possibilities. Every mindful choice becomes a new cause, planting seeds for different futures. No matter how tangled the web has been, each moment is a chance to weave differently. This is why trust in the universe grows stronger. You realize that while you cannot rewrite what has been done, you can always shift how you act now, and that choice is powerful. In daily life, this means paying attention not just to big decisions but to small ones. The way you respond when someone irritates you, the tone you use when you speak, the thoughts you entertain when you are alone, these are all strands in the web. People often underestimate small actions, thinking they do not matter. But the web makes clear that nothing is insignificant. The world you experience tomorrow is woven partly from the choices you make today. When you see this, even the most ordinary moment becomes sacred ground for shaping your future. This teaching also helps transform how we view suffering. Often, when pain arises, the question becomes, why me? What did I do to deserve this? But karma is not about blame. It is about understanding that what unfolds now arises from countless interwoven causes, some personal, some collective, some stretching back far beyond what you can trace. To sit in endless guilt or resentment misses the point. The real question is not, why did this happen? But, how do I respond now? What seed am I planting in this moment? In this way, suffering becomes a turning point, an opportunity to weave a new pattern. Trust also grows when you realize that karma is not limited to your personal story. Entire communities, societies, Even civilizations are part of the karmic web. The greed of a few may ripple into poverty for many. The compassion of one leader may inspire countless acts of goodness. The universe is not indifferent. It is alive with this law of cause and effect, a law that binds us all together. When you understand this, you feel less alone. You see that your choices, however small, participate in shaping the whole. One of the most liberating aspects of this teaching is that it dissolves the obsession with control without breeding helplessness. In the last lesson, we saw how control is an illusion. Now, karma shows that your participation still matters deeply. You cannot control the web, but you can contribute to it. You do not need to dominate life. You need only to add strands of clarity, compassion, and wisdom. Over time, those strands strengthen the whole fabric. You may not see the results immediately, but the web never forgets. Every cause bears fruit in its time. This naturally leads to patience. Modern life encourages instant results, but karma reminds us that seeds take time to ripen. A harsh word may have an immediate sting, but the effect of a gentle presence may unfold quietly for years before blooming fully. To trust the universe means accepting this timing, allowing causes to ripen when they are ready. Your role is not to force the fruit, but to keep planting wisely. With this perspective, frustration gives way to faith in the slow, steady rhythm of the web. It also shifts how you view morality. Rules and commandments often feel external, imposed by authority. But karma shows that ethical behavior is not about obedience. It is about alignment with the way reality works. When you act with honesty, kindness, and integrity, you are not following orders, you are planting seeds that naturally bring peace and clarity. When you act with greed or hatred, you are planting seeds that naturally bring turmoil. Morality is simply wisdom applied to the web. It is not about judgment, but about skillful participation. One of the most beautiful expressions of this is generosity. When you give without expectation, you strengthen the strands of trust and goodwill. This does not only benefit the receiver, it shapes your own mind, softening attachment and opening the heart. The act itself becomes a seed that transforms both giver and receiver. This is karma at its most luminous, the recognition that each act of goodness is not lost, but woven into the web, where it can uplift countless lives. Modern science has started to reflect this truth in subtle ways. Research into social behavior shows that kindness spreads through networks, influencing people who may never meet the original giver. One smile can shift a stranger's mood, who then treats someone else more kindly, setting off a chain of positive effects. Karma anticipated this long before studies confirmed it. The universe is always recording the vibrations of our actions, always transmitting them through the web of life. Understanding karma as a web also deepens compassion. When someone harms you, the instinct is to respond with anger, to see them as the sole cause of your pain. But the web reveals that their actions are also conditioned by their upbringing, by their wounds, by causes beyond their control. This does not excuse harm, but it opens the possibility of forgiveness. You see that just as you are caught in the web, so are they. Responding with hatred only strengthens harmful patterns. Responding with understanding begins to untangle them. The Buddha often taught that the greatest power is not to punish, but to break the cycle. When you choose not to continue a pattern of harm, you free yourself and others from repeating it. This is the highest trust in the universe. The trust that even when pain arises, you can choose not to plant more seeds of pain. You can end a cycle with your own awareness. That choice is the thread of freedom woven through the web. Karma also changes how you see success and failure. In the modern world, success is often measured by outcomes, wealth, recognition, achievement. But from the perspective of karma, what matters most are the causes you set in motion. You cannot always control whether your project succeeds, whether others appreciate your work, or whether your efforts bear fruit quickly. But you can control the integrity and intention behind your actions. When you act with clarity and compassion, you have already succeeded, because you have planted wholesome seeds. The fruit will ripen in its own way, in its own time, perhaps in ways you will never see. This perspective brings great peace. You no longer measure your worth by immediate results, but by the quality of your participation. Life becomes less about chasing outcomes and more about weaving wisely. Trust grows naturally when you know that every sincere effort has value, even if the results remain unseen. You begin to see yourself not as a failure when things do not go as planned, but as a weaver constantly shaping the web with each choice. The teaching of karma also invites humility. Because the web is vast, you can never fully see all the causes at play. This means you cannot claim full credit for success, nor full blame for failure. Every achievement arises from countless conditions: your teachers, your family, the society around you, even strangers who influenced your path without your knowing. When you realize this, gratitude blossoms. You see how much you owe to others, and how deeply interconnected your life truly is. Trusting the universe in this way softens the loneliness of existence. The sense that you are separate, struggling alone against the world, dissolves when you recognize the web. Your life is supported by countless invisible threads. The farmer who grew your food, the engineers who built the roads, the ancestors who carried forward knowledge and survival. Even the breath you take is shared with trees and oceans. Karma reveals that you are not isolated, you are woven into a vast, living whole. Finally, this teaching invites responsibility, but not the heavy, guilt-ridden responsibility of control. It is the responsibility of presence. Each moment is an opportunity to weave wisely. Each thought of kindness, each pause before anger, each act of generosity adds a new thread. The web does not demand perfection, it only reflects participation. The more conscious your participation, the stronger your trust in the universe becomes. You see that life is not about controlling the outcome, but about contributing to the harmony of the whole. So as you rest with this lesson, feel how the weight of punishment and fear dissolves. Karma is not a chain binding you, it is a web connecting you. Your life is not condemned by past mistakes, nor is it meaningless chaos. It is an unfolding tapestry, woven with threads of infinite causes, and every moment offers you a new strand to place. Trust grows when you know that your presence matters, that the universe responds to the seeds you plant, and that nothing is wasted. The web holds it all, weaving you into the great rhythm of existence. And in that rhythm, you can finally rest. The understanding of karma as a web leaves us with a quiet but powerful realization. Life is not random, yet it is also not permanent. Even the most carefully woven threads of cause and effect will not remain forever. Relationships shift, circumstances evolve, health changes, societies transform. Everything you touch, everything you know, even everything you are will one day pass. To the mind grasping for control, this feels terrifying. But to the heart that learns to trust, impermanence becomes the very key to freedom. Without change, there would be no healing, no growth, no possibility of renewal. The fleeting nature of reality is not something to fear, but something to lean on. Impermanence, or anicca in the Buddha's teaching, is the rhythm of existence. From the smallest cell in your body to the stars overhead, everything is in motion. This is not an abstract concept, but something you can see directly if you pay attention. The breath you are taking now was not the same as the one before it. The thought in your mind a moment ago is already gone. The cells in your body are continuously dying and being replaced. Even the earth beneath your feet is shifting, mountains rising and eroding, rivers carving new paths. Change is not an occasional interruption, it is the fabric of life itself. When we deny this truth, suffering arises. People cling to jobs as if they will last forever, to youth as if it will not fade, to loved ones as if they will never depart. When change inevitably comes, the mind panics. Grief deepens because we treated impermanence as betrayal rather than as the natural unfolding of conditions. To live in trust means shifting this perspective, welcoming impermanence as the very teacher that allows us to live fully. This recognition can transform how you meet loss. The death of a loved one, the end of a chapter in your life, the fading of a dream, all are painful. But pain does not have to become despair. Impermanence reminds you that the beauty of those experiences was inseparable from their fleeting nature. A flower's blossom touches us deeply precisely because it does not last. If it were permanent, it would lose its magic. In the same way, every moment of joy, every connection, every opportunity glows brighter when you see it as temporary. You no longer cling to it with desperation, but savor it with gratitude. Impermanence also reveals the futility of clinging to identity. People often say, "This is just who I am," as if the self were solid. Yet, if you look carefully, you will see that who you were 10 years ago is not who you are today. Your thoughts, your preferences, your fears, even your body, all have shifted countless times. The self is not a stone, it is a river. Trust arises when you stop fighting to hold on to a fixed identity and instead allow yourself to evolve. This opens the door to growth, forgiveness, and transformation, because you recognize that no mistake or role defines you forever. In relationships, this awareness softens attachment. Love deepens, not by pretending someone will stay unchanged, but by honoring the preciousness of shared time. Knowing that your partner, friend, or child will change allows you to meet them with curiosity, to rediscover them again and again, instead of imprisoning them in old expectations. Impermanence keeps love alive, because it reminds you never to take connection for granted. Impermanence also reshapes how we experience suffering itself. When pain grips you, whether physical or emotional, the thought that it will never end intensifies the torment. But when you rest in the truth of impermanence, you see that even the deepest wound shifts over time. No storm lasts forever. No feeling, however overwhelming, remains unchanged. This does not erase pain, but it changes your relationship with it. Instead of being crushed under its weight, you can endure with patience, knowing that change is inevitable. This insight brings enormous strength in difficult times. Survivors of hardship often speak of a turning point when they realized, "This will not last forever." That recognition itself is an act of trust. You learn to ride the waves instead of drowning in them. Buddhism calls this resilience, not because suffering disappears, but because you see it as a passing condition rather than as your eternal identity. Another dimension of impermanence is how it liberates us from greed. The endless chase for wealth, status, or possessions is fueled by the belief that these things will secure lasting happiness. But impermanence shows otherwise. Money comes and goes. Recognition fades. Bodies age, no matter how carefully preserved. When you embrace impermanence, you stop pouring energy into illusions of permanence. You begin to ask instead, what truly matters in this brief life? And the answer often turns toward connection, meaning, and inner peace rather than endless accumulation. Impermanence also changes how we relate to time. Many people postpone living, saying, "I'll be happy when I get that promotion, when I retire, when things settle down." But impermanence reminds us that waiting for life is dangerous, because the future is never guaranteed. Trusting impermanence means living now, tasting the fullness of each moment without postponement. It is not reckless, it is awake. It recognizes that this moment, fragile and fleeting, is the only certainty you ever have. This awareness deepens mindfulness. Every sip of tea, every step, every breath becomes worthy of attention. When you know it will not come again, you meet it with reverence. This is why Buddhist teachers encourage mindfulness of the ordinary, not because the ordinary is small, but because it is precious in its transience. Washing dishes, feeling the warmth of water on your hands, listening to the sound of birds at dawn, these are not distractions from life, but life itself. Impermanence reveals their sacredness. Impermanence also awakens compassion. When you realize that everyone is subject to loss, aging, and death, your heart softens. You see that the person who angers you is also fragile, also carrying the weight of change. This recognition does not excuse harmful behavior, but it helps you respond with understanding rather than bitterness. Compassion grows when you recognize that we are all walking the same path of impermanence, each struggling to find peace in its midst. Death contemplation in Buddhism is not morbid but liberating. To face directly the reality that you will die one day frees you from distraction and trivial concerns. It sharpens your priorities and invites you to live authentically. Instead of fearing impermanence, you see it as the ground of meaning. Life's value lies not in its length, but in its depth, in the way you show up while you are here. This is why many practitioners repeat phrases such as, "Death is certain, the time is uncertain." Far from depressing, this truth infuses each day with urgency and wonder. Science also aligns with this teaching. Physics shows that the universe itself is in constant flux, from the smallest particles to the largest galaxies. Biology reveals the same in every cell. Neuroscience shows that even memories, once thought to be fixed, shift each time they are recalled. Impermanence is not just a spiritual teaching, it is the law of nature confirmed by observation. To deny it is to deny reality itself. Trust comes when you align with this truth rather than resist it. Impermanence can even transform ambition. Instead of striving for achievements as monuments to permanence, you begin to see them as contributions to a flowing river. You write not to create an eternal masterpiece, but to express truth in this moment. You build not to secure immortality, but to serve those alive now. This shift removes the burden of needing to prove yourself forever and replaces it with the joy of participating in life's unfolding. In practice, embracing impermanence involves letting go of clinging to outcomes. You still act, you still care, but you release the demand that things remain unchanged. When you succeed, you appreciate it without grasping. When you fail, you learn without despairing. Both success and failure lose their sharp edge because you know they too will pass. This equanimity is not cold detachment, but warm acceptance, rooted in trust that change is the nature of all things. One powerful meditation in Buddhism is observing the breath while repeating, "This too shall pass." Whether the breath is deep or shallow, calm or restless, it always shifts. Over time, this practice conditions the mind to meet all experiences the same way. Joy arises, "This too shall pass." Sorrow arises, "This too shall pass." Instead of swinging wildly between craving and aversion, you rest in the middle, trusting impermanence as your guide. Impermanence also invites creativity. When you stop expecting stability, you open yourself to innovation. Artists often say their best work arises when they surrender control and allow change to guide the process. Life itself becomes art when you meet it the same way, open to surprise, willing to be reshaped. Trust grows not because the future is predictable, but because you are willing to meet it as it comes. This teaching also dismantles the fear of letting go. People hold on to old habits, toxic relationships, or outdated beliefs because they fear emptiness if they release them. But impermanence teaches that letting go always makes space for something new. A tree must shed leaves to grow again in spring. You too must release what no longer serves you to allow new life to enter. Trust is knowing that the cycle of renewal never fails, even if you cannot yet see what will bloom. The ultimate gift of impermanence is liberation from fear of the unknown. When you realize that everything is already in motion, you stop demanding certainty. Instead of clinging to what is passing, you open your hands and participate. You step into the flow not as its master but as its companion. Trust becomes second nature because you know that change is not against you. It is the very rhythm that sustains you. As you rest with this truth, notice how the fear of ending softens. Endings are not failures. They are the gateways through which new beginnings enter. The night does not destroy the day, it prepares the dawn. The falling leaf does not signal death alone. It nourishes the soil for future growth. Impermanence is the pulse of the universe, and when you lean into it, you find peace not in clinging but in flowing. To trust impermanence is to live awake, free from the chains of fear and attachment. It is to see beauty in the fleeting, strength in the changing, and hope in the uncertain. When you no longer resist the truth of anicca, you discover that life does not need to last forever to be meaningful. Its very transience is what makes it sacred, and in that recognition you find not despair, but trust, the quiet faith that every ending carries the seed of a beginning, and that the universe, ever-changing, is guiding you through it all. When impermanence settles into the heart, you begin to see that change is not simply random collapse, but part of a greater unfolding. The fading of one thing allows the arising of another, and beneath what looks like chaos there is an order that holds everything together. This is where another profound teaching enters, pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination. It reveals that nothing exists on its own, and nothing arises without conditions. To trust the universe is to understand that even in moments of uncertainty, there is a hidden structure, a web of causes and effects, connecting all things in ways deeper than the eye can see. This teaching shows us that everything in life is interwoven. A flower does not bloom by itself. It relies on sunlight, rain, soil, air, and countless unseen conditions that came before. Your very breath right now is possible because of the green life on this planet, because of oceans that generate oxygen, because of stars that burned billions of years ago to create the elements in your body. What appears as a single moment is actually the meeting point of infinite threads. This is not mystical thinking, but the very way reality unfolds. When life feels chaotic, it is often because we see only fragments. A setback appears senseless until you notice the larger field of causes that shaped it. A painful ending feels cruel until you see the space it created for growth you did not expect. Dependent origination invites you to widen your lens, to see not just isolated events but the whole network that gives rise to them. This shift transforms fear into trust, because you realize nothing is truly random. There is always a chain of interdependent conditions at play. The Buddha described dependent origination as the foundation of wisdom. He pointed out that suffering arises not from fate or punishment, but from conditions. Craving arises from ignorance. Clinging arises from craving. Suffering arises from clinging. And just as conditions create suffering, conditions can also end it. Wisdom, compassion, mindfulness, all of these can interrupt the cycle and bring freedom. This shows that nothing is fixed. If conditions change, outcomes change. Life is not locked into chaos or despair. It is always open to transformation. Understanding this in daily life helps dissolve despair. When hardship strikes, the mind often cries, "Why me? Why now?" But dependent origination teaches that events are not personal attacks. They are results of countless conditions many beyond your control. A storm destroys a harvest, not because the farmer is cursed, but because weather, soil, and climate all interrelate in complex ways. By seeing events as conditional rather than personal, you free yourself from bitterness. Trust arises when you accept that life unfolds according to causes, not according to judgment. This understanding also invites responsibility. While you cannot control every condition, you can influence the web through your actions. Choosing kindness instead of anger, patience instead of haste, wisdom instead of ignorance, all these shift the conditions for future experiences. Every mindful act adds a thread to the larger fabric. You may not see the outcome immediately, but the law of dependent origination ensures that no action is wasted. This awareness empowers you. Instead of feeling trapped by chaos, you recognize your capacity to shape conditions skillfully. Dependent origination also reveals why blame is unhelpful. When someone causes harm, it is easy to focus on them as the single cause. But their behavior too is the product of conditions, their upbringing, their wounds, their ignorance, the culture around them. This does not excuse harm, but it shifts the lens from condemnation to understanding. By seeing the web of conditions, you cultivate compassion. You see that anger only creates more harmful conditions, while understanding and wise action have the power to change the cycle. On a deeper level, this teaching dissolves the illusion of separateness. We often live as if we were independent entities, self-made and self-contained. But dependent origination shows that no one exists apart from others. Your very body is a collection of elements that once belonged to rivers, stars, and soil. Your thoughts are shaped by languages, traditions, and teachers that came before you. Even the sense of I arises from conditions of perception and memory. This insight is humbling and liberating. It reveals that your life is not a solitary struggle, but part of a vast, interconnected dance. Trust in the universe grows naturally from this recognition. When you see the web of interdependence, you realize that you are supported in ways you never noticed. The food on your table, the roof over your head, the knowledge you use, all are fruits of countless beings and forces. Even in times of uncertainty, this web sustains you. You are not alone. Life is not chaos without meaning. It is a network of interrelated causes constantly giving rise to new possibilities. This insight also transforms how you meet uncertainty. When things do not go as planned, the mind sees only disorder. But dependent origination reveals that what feels like disorder may be conditions shifting in ways you cannot yet perceive. A door closes, and you see only loss. Yet that closure may create conditions for growth or opportunities that would not otherwise appear. This does not mean every painful event is secretly good, but it does mean every event arises from a web that is larger than your immediate view. Trust deepens when you remember that the order behind chaos is always at work, even when hidden. This teaching also reshapes how you approach goals. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, you focus on nurturing the right conditions. A gardener does not force a seed to grow by command. They prepare the soil, water it, provide sunlight, and trust that the conditions will allow growth. In the same way, you cultivate patience, practice compassion, develop mindfulness, and let results ripen naturally. This way of living replaces anxiety with trust because you understand your role, not to control outcomes, but to create conditions for harmony. Dependent origination also illuminates the nature of emotions. Feelings do not appear out of nowhere. They are conditioned by thoughts, memories, and bodily states. Anger arises when expectations clash with reality. Joy arises when connection and gratitude align. By seeing emotions as conditional, you no longer identify with them as fixed identities. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you can see, "Conditions for anger have arisen." This subtle shift creates space. You can respond with awareness instead of being swept away. Trust grows because you know emotions are not permanent states, but conditional processes that can change when conditions change. Modern science reflects this wisdom. Systems theory in ecology shows that ecosystems thrive or collapse based on interdependent relationships. Neuroscience reveals that brain patterns arise from conditions of environment and experience. Physics demonstrates that even particles do not exist independently, but in relation to other forces. Buddhism anticipated these insights centuries ago, teaching that reality is not made of isolated parts but of relationships. Trust in the universe becomes natural when you realize you are living in a relational field rather than a chaotic void. This understanding also reshapes how we approach community. In a culture that often glorifies independence, dependent origination reminds us that flourishing comes from interdependence. Just as a tree cannot grow without soil and rain, a human cannot thrive without support, connection, and care. Recognizing this reduces shame in seeking help and deepens gratitude for those who support you. It also inspires generosity, knowing that your actions ripple through the web of conditions to uplift others. Even suffering itself can be transformed through this teaching. The Buddha explained that suffering arises from specific conditions: craving, ignorance, clinging. This means suffering is not an eternal curse, but a conditional state. By changing the conditions, suffering can end. This is the essence of liberation. It is not magic, but a shift in causes. When wisdom replaces ignorance, when compassion replaces hatred, when letting go replaces clinging, suffering loses its fuel. This truth gives profound hope. No matter how tangled life feels, freedom is always possible because conditions can always shift. This perspective also dismantles the fear of chaos in global events. Wars, crises, and upheavals seem like pure disorder. But dependent origination shows they arise from conditions: greed, ignorance, fear, inequality. Addressing these conditions at their roots is more effective than despairing at the surface. Just as harmful conditions create turmoil, wise conditions can create peace. This perspective invites you to trust that collective change is possible when enough people contribute to shifting the web. On a personal level, this teaching brings humility and compassion toward your own mistakes. Instead of labeling yourself as broken, you can see that your patterns of thought and behavior arise from conditions. Perhaps they came from childhood wounds, cultural pressures, or past experiences. This does not excuse harmful actions, but it opens the door to healing. By changing present conditions through practice, support, and awareness, you can reshape the future. Trust deepens because you realize you are not fixed. You are conditioned, and conditions can always evolve. Dependent origination also encourages a deeper awareness of daily choices. You begin to see that every action, however small, participates in the web. A harsh word creates conditions for hurt. A moment of patience creates conditions for peace. A single act of generosity may ripple far beyond what you can see. This awareness transforms ordinary life into sacred participation. Each moment becomes an opportunity to weave conditions that nurture harmony, both within yourself and in the larger world. In meditation, this teaching is experienced directly. As you sit and observe, you notice how thoughts arise not from nowhere, but from subtle conditions, sounds, memories, bodily sensations. You see how craving pulls one thought after another, how awareness interrupts the cycle. This direct experience dissolves the illusion of randomness. Even the stream of the mind is conditional. Seeing this brings calm, because you no longer fear your thoughts as uncontrollable chaos. You trust the process, knowing you can influence conditions with mindfulness. Ultimately, dependent origination reveals a profound order beneath the surface of life. What seems chaotic is not without pattern. What seems meaningless is not without connection. To trust the universe is to align with this order, not by trying to map every thread, which is impossible, but by recognizing that no event stands alone. Each moment is a meeting point of infinite causes, and each choice you make contributes to future causes. This recognition transforms fear into faith, despair into possibility, and isolation into belonging. So as you let this teaching sink in, feel how the anxiety of randomness begins to fade. Life is not a storm of disconnected fragments. It is a vast, interconnected unfolding, where every thread has its place, and every condition shapes the next. You are not drifting alone in chaos. You are part of a living web, supported by conditions seen and unseen, always shifting, always guiding, always offering the chance to weave harmony. And in that recognition, trust arises naturally, the trust that beneath the apparent disorder, there is always order waiting to be seen. When you begin to see dependent origination as the hidden order beneath apparent chaos, a new question arises naturally. If everything is interwoven, what does it mean to live wisely within this web? The answer does not point only to personal liberation, but to something greater, the vow to serve others as inseparable from serving oneself. This is where the path of the Bodhisattva appears, not as an abstract idea but as a living leap of trust. It is a trust so profound that one places the well-being of all beings before personal escape, relying on the universe's wisdom to carry that vow. The Bodhisattva path begins with the recognition that self and other are not separate. When you understand dependent origination deeply, the boundaries of me and them soften. The suffering of another reverberates through the whole web. Your own joy is touched by the joy of others. To work only for your own liberation while ignoring others becomes impossible, because the web cannot be healed in fragments. Trusting this truth, the Bodhisattva vows to walk the path, not alone, but for the benefit of all, knowing that freedom is collective. This leap requires immense courage. The ordinary mind clings to safety, to securing its own comfort before considering others. The Bodhisattva, however, trusts that by turning outward, by making compassion the center one, aligns with the deepest current of the universe. This trust is not naive. It is based on the recognition that the universe itself sustains through interdependence. Just as trees give oxygen without asking, rivers flow without withholding, and the sun radiates light without condition, so too can a human heart participate in this boundless giving. To live in this way is to harmonize with the rhythm of life itself. The vow to save others before oneself is not about martyrdom or self-neglect. It is about seeing that in lifting others, you are lifted as well, because no boundary truly separates you. The Bodhisattva trusts that compassion is not depletion, but renewal. Every act of service deepens strength rather than drains it, because it arises from alignment with universal truth. This is why great masters, even when physically frail, radiated boundless energy. Their lives were fueled not by personal striving, but by the inexhaustible current of compassion. This path also transforms how you understand trust. Ordinary trust often means believing things will work out for you personally, but the Bodhisattva's trust expands far beyond the individual. It is a trust that no effort of compassion is wasted, even if results are unseen. A kind word may prevent despair in someone you never meet again. A gesture of generosity may ripple into countless acts of goodness. The Bodhisattva does not measure success by immediate outcomes, but trusts the law of interconnection to carry seeds of compassion where they are needed. This vow also reshapes the meaning of patience. To commit to liberating all beings means acknowledging that the task is endless. Beings are numberless, suffering arises endlessly, conditions constantly shift. Yet, the Bodhisattva embraces this impossibility with joy, trusting that the vow itself sustains. The power lies not in completion, but in devotion. Each act of compassion is complete in itself, even as the vow extends without limit. This patience is born of trust that the journey matters more than reaching a final end. The Bodhisattva's leap is also a leap beyond fear. Fear arises when we focus narrowly on the self, anxious about loss, pain, or death. But when the heart expands to include all beings, the self is no longer the fragile center. Concern shifts outward, and fear dissolves into purpose. Trust in universal wisdom replaces the need for personal guarantees. Even death itself is no longer terrifying, because the vow continues beyond a single lifetime. This is why bodhisattvas are depicted as fearless, not because they are immune to pain, but because their trust in compassion transcends personal survival. In practical life, this path invites you to expand perspective in each moment. When frustration arises, ask not only, "How do I protect myself?" but also, "How can this response reduce suffering for all involved?" When making choices, consider not only your gain, but the well-being of the wider web. This does not require grand sacrifices. It begins with small acts of awareness. The Bodhisattva's trust is practiced every time you pause before speaking harshly, every time you choose generosity over greed, every time you remember that your life is part of something larger. One of the most profound aspects of this vow is its reliance on faith in unseen effects. You may never know how your actions shape others. A moment of kindness may ripple through generations. A lesson taught to a child may echo decades later. Trusting this unseen continuity allows you to act without attachment to recognition. The Bodhisattva path is quiet, often unnoticed, but its effects are vast. This trust frees you from the demand for immediate validation, anchoring your life in deeper meaning. The vow also teaches the difference between pity and compassion. Pity sees others as separate and inferior. Compassion recognizes shared humanity. The Bodhisattva does not help from above, but serves from within the web, trusting that connection itself heals. This attitude prevents burnout, because it arises from equality rather than superiority. Compassion replenishes itself when rooted in shared being. Trusting this truth allows you to give without exhaustion, to serve without resentment. The Bodhisattva's leap also challenges the idea that trust in the universe means passive acceptance. It is not about retreating into personal peace while the world suffers. True trust means believing the universe supports compassion, that acting with wisdom and kindness is not futile, even when problems seem overwhelming. A bodhisattva faces the world's suffering directly, not with despair, but with faith, that every drop of compassion nourishes the whole ocean. This vow also transforms how you view enemies. Those who harm others are themselves caught in conditions of ignorance and suffering. To respond only with hatred perpetuates the cycle. The bodhisattva trusts that compassion, even for those who cause harm, is the path to breaking cycles of violence. This does not mean tolerating injustice. It means responding with actions rooted in wisdom rather than vengeance. Such trust is radical. It refuses to let darkness dictate your heart. The bodhisattva path also deepens humility. To vow to save all beings is to acknowledge that you are part of the same struggle. You do not stand apart as a savior, but as a companion. Trust arises when you know you do not carry the burden alone. Countless others, past and present, share the same vow, weaving together a field of compassion that spans time and space. This collective strength supports you, reminding you that your efforts are joined to something greater. This leap also transforms how you experience meaning. Many people seek purpose in achievements, possessions, or recognition. But the Bodhisattva's purpose is simple and inexhaustible: to reduce suffering and nurture awakening. This purpose does not fade with age, loss, or changing circumstances. It remains alive as long as there are beings to serve. Trust in this purpose carries you through the ups and downs of personal life, offering stability where other forms of meaning falter. Another dimension of this trust is the willingness to act without certainty. The Bodhisattva steps into situations without knowing the outcome, guided only by compassion. This leap requires faith that universal wisdom will carry the effort where it needs to go. Sometimes actions bear immediate fruit, sometimes they appear to fail. But the Bodhisattva trusts that no act of compassion is ever lost. The web of interdependence ensures that each seed contributes to the greater whole. This vow also dissolves the illusion of scarcity. The self fears that giving will leave it depleted, that caring for others means losing for oneself. But the Bodhisattva discovers that generosity expands the heart. The more you give, the more capacity you discover. Trusting this truth allows you to live abundantly, even with little, because your wealth is measured not in possessions, but in the depth of your compassion. The leap of trust also transforms how you approach spiritual practice. Many traditions emphasize meditation for personal peace. The Bodhisattva, however, practices for the benefit of all beings. Each breath, each insight, each moment of mindfulness is dedicated outward. This transforms practice from self-centered effort into universal offering. Trust grows when you see your practice not as isolated progress, but as nourishment for the whole web. At its deepest level, the Bodhisattva vow reflects trust in the nature of awakening itself. The Buddha taught that all beings possess the seed of enlightenment. No one is excluded, no matter how lost they appear. The Bodhisattva trusts this truth absolutely, seeing the potential for awakening in every being. This vision transforms how you relate to others. Instead of labeling people as hopeless or evil, you hold faith in their hidden potential. This trust itself becomes a force that helps awaken it. The Bodhisattva path is not easy. It demands patience, humility, and a willingness to endure uncertainty. But it offers a depth of meaning that no personal achievement can match. To live for the well-being of all is to align with the deepest current of the universe. This trust carries you through hardship, fuels your compassion, and grounds your purpose. It transforms life from a narrow struggle for survival into a vast offering of service. So as you rest with this teaching, let the leap of trust settle into your heart. It is the recognition that you are not separate, that your life is bound to the lives of all beings. It is the vow to live not just for yourself, but for the healing of the whole web. And it is the trust that universal wisdom supports every act of compassion, no matter how small. In this vow, fear dissolves, meaning deepens, and trust becomes unshakable, the trust that by serving others, you discover the truest expression of yourself. The Bodhisattva's vow to place others before oneself is already an act of profound trust, but it raises a deeper challenge. How can anyone walk such a vast path when the future is unknown, when outcomes cannot be guaranteed, when the world itself resists certainty? The answer comes not from clinging to strategies or securing final answers, but from entering what Zen calls don't know mind. This is not ignorance, but the opposite, a fearless openness to the mystery of life. It is the trust that wisdom does not arise from holding tightly to conclusions, but from allowing space for the unknown to speak. In Zen practice, don't know mind is the foundation of clarity. The ordinary mind seeks to label, categorize, and predict. It wants to know who is right, what will happen, and how to secure control. But this habit of clinging to certainty often blinds us to reality as it actually island. When you already know, you stop listening. When you think you have all the answers, you miss the subtle truths unfolding in the present. Don't know mind invites you to release this grasping, to meet life with humility and freshness, trusting that not knowing is closer to reality than false certainty. This surrender is not weakness. It takes enormous courage to admit, "I don't know." The ego resists, fearing that uncertainty means inadequacy. But in truth, uncertainty is the natural state of life. The future is never guaranteed, outcomes are never fully predictable, and the universe is far more complex than any single mind can grasp. To live pretending otherwise is to build walls against reality. To surrender to not knowing is to align with how life actually works. This alignment breeds trust, because you no longer fight against the flow of uncertainty, you step into it with openness. In daily life, don't know mind can transform even simple interactions. When you meet another person, you may believe you already know who they are based on past encounters, labels, or assumptions. But if you release that, if you approach them with don't know mind, you meet them freshly, you listen more deeply, you discover details you would have overlooked. Trust grows in relationships when people feel seen without being boxed into old judgments. This practice allows space for others to change, just as you also change. In times of crisis, don't know mind becomes even more essential. When plans collapse or life takes a sudden turn, the impulse is to panic, to demand certainty, to scramble for answers. But often no immediate answer exists. The future has not yet revealed itself. In these moments, surrendering to don't know mind allows you to rest in openness rather than in fear. It creates space for creativity, patience, and resilience. Trust arises not because you know what will happen, but because you accept that you don't, and you are willing to move step by step anyway. Zen teachers often say that don't know mind is the closest mind to awakening. This is because awakening is not a matter of adding more knowledge, but of seeing directly. Knowledge is useful, but it can become a barrier when it hardens into rigid concepts. Don't know mind loosens these barriers, allowing you to encounter life directly, unfiltered. A flower is not reduced to a plant of this species. It is simply seen in its freshness. A moment of silence is not filled with concepts of boredom or productivity. It is simply silence. Trust in the universe deepens when you meet life this way, because you no longer demand it conform to your ideas. You let it be what it island. This attitude also dismantles the fear of failure. Much anxiety comes from the belief that you must know exactly how to succeed, that mistakes mean disaster. But with don't know mind, mistakes are simply part of the unfolding. They are conditions that teach, redirect, and refine. When you release the demand to always know, you become free to try, to explore, to experiment. Trust replaces fear because you no longer require certainty before taking a step. Each step is taken with openness, learning along the way. Another dimension of don't know mind is its capacity to dissolve conflict. Arguments often arise because people cling to certainty about being right. Each side defends their knowledge, unwilling to admit limits. But when you approach with don't know mind, you become curious rather than combative. You listen for nuance, for possibilities beyond rigid positions. This does not mean abandoning discernment, but it means recognizing that no single perspective contains the whole truth. Trust grows in dialogue, when humility replaces arrogance, when openness allows common ground to emerge. In spiritual practice, don't know mind is cultivated through meditation. When you sit and notice thoughts, the mind often rushes to interpret, this is good, this is bad, this means I am progressing, this means I am failing. But if you release all of that, if you simply notice with openness, you meet the present without judgment. You rest in awareness itself, which needs no conclusions. Over time, this trains the mind to relax its constant grasping for certainty. Trust arises naturally because awareness itself proves sufficient, even without answers. This approach also nurtures creativity. Artists, thinkers, and innovators often describe breakthroughs occurring when they release expectations and allow themselves to sit in the unknown. Don't know mind creates the spaciousness where new possibilities appear. When you stop demanding that life fit your preconceived answers, you open to insights that were previously hidden. Trust in this process allows you to engage life as an unfolding mystery rather than a problem to be solved. The teaching also applies to mortality. Much fear of death arises from the demand to know what happens after. Religions and philosophies offer various answers, but in truth, no one fully knows. Don't know. Mind invites you to rest in that mystery without fear. Death becomes not a terrifying unknown, but a vast openness. Trust arises when you no longer need guarantees, but accept the mystery as part of life's flow. This surrender brings peace, even in the face of the ultimate uncertainty. In modern life, where information is abundant and people prize certainty, don't know mind can feel radical. But information is not the same as wisdom. You can collect endless data and still miss the truth of a single breath. Don't know mind reminds you that wisdom arises not from accumulating facts, but from meeting each moment directly. Trust grows when you let go of the illusion that you must always know, and instead cultivate presence. On a psychological level, don't know mind also helps release perfectionism. Perfectionists crave certainty, needing to guarantee outcomes before they act. This often leads to paralysis or burnout. But when you accept not knowing, you allow yourself to move forward without needing perfection. Progress becomes possible because you trust the process rather than demand absolute assurance. Each step is taken lightly, with curiosity instead of pressure. This teaching also heals relationships with the future. Many live in constant anxiety, projecting worst-case scenarios, needing certainty about how things will unfold. Don't know mind invites you to release those projections. The future has not yet come, and no amount of worry will create certainty. To rest in don't know mind is to accept that the future is open, filled with possibilities you cannot predict. Trust in this openness frees you from the cage of fear. Zen masters often embody this teaching through simple words. When asked about the meaning of life, a master might respond, "Don't know." Far from dismissive, this response points to the humility required for true insight. By admitting not knowing, the master invites the student into direct experience rather than second-hand answers. This humility is itself a form of trust, a willingness to let life reveal itself without forcing conclusions. This practice also connects deeply with compassion. When you meet someone suffering, the impulse is often to explain, to give answers. But sometimes the greatest gift is to sit with them in don't know mind, offering presence rather than solutions. This humility creates space for genuine connection, where both can trust the unfolding without pressure to fix. It is a reminder that trust is not always about answers, but often about companionship in uncertainty. Don't know mind also cultivates resilience in times of collective uncertainty, economic upheavals, social unrest, environmental crises. The temptation is to demand absolute predictions, to seek leaders or systems that promise certainty. But such promises often collapse, leaving despair. Don't know mind accepts that uncertainty is inherent in collective life as well. From this acceptance, resilience grows. Communities can respond with flexibility, adaptability, and trust rather than panic. On the deepest level, don't know mind dismantles the illusion of control. Control depends on knowing outcomes, knowing paths, knowing identities. When you release this need, you discover a freedom that cannot be shaken. Life becomes a field of openness, where each moment is fresh, unbound by rigid expectations. Trust arises not because you know what will happen, but because you no longer need to. As you rest in this teaching, notice how your shoulders soften, how your breath deepens, the pressure to know, to answer, to secure dissolves. In its place is openness, humility, and peace. This is the fearless trust of don't know mind, the trust that the universe does not require you to have all the answers, only to be present, open, and willing. And in that openness, wisdom flows naturally, like a river unblocked at last. When the mind surrenders to not knowing, a deeper form of patience begins to take root. If we are free from the need for certainty, we also learn to release the demand for speed. Life does not always unfold on our schedule, and wisdom lies in trusting that causes ripen in their own time. This is what Buddhism calls the Dharma of timing. It is not passive waiting, but an active faith that every seed, once planted, will bear fruit when conditions are right, not when desire insists. The Dharma of timing begins with an understanding of cause and effect as a living law. Nothing appears out of nowhere. Each moment arises because of countless conditions converging, like waves meeting on the surface of the sea. But those conditions do not ripen instantly. The seed does not bloom the day it touches soil, the child does not grow into adulthood overnight, and suffering does not transform into wisdom in a single breath. The natural law of ripening cannot be rushed. To demand otherwise is to fight reality itself. Trust is cultivated when we learn to rest in this rhythm. Patience in Buddhism is not merely tolerance, it is wisdom. It recognizes that unseen forces are always at work beneath the surface. When you practice generosity, you may not see the results immediately, but the act sets into motion ripples that move far beyond your view. When you train the mind through meditation, the changes may be subtle at first, but over time, they reshape your very way of being. To trust the Dharma of timing is to know that every sincere effort has value, even if results remain hidden for years. This patience also prevents despair when progress feels slow. Many people abandon practice or self-cultivation because they do not see instant transformation. They mistake delayed ripening for failure. But the Dharma of timing reminds us that transformation often happens silently, like roots growing underground before a sprout breaks through. What looks like stillness is often preparation. Trust grows when you recognize that unseen causes are weaving outcomes even when nothing appears to change on the surface. This truth applies not only to personal growth, but also to relationships. How often do we demand others change on our schedule, expecting them to overcome habits or heal wounds quickly? But each person ripens at their own pace, conditioned by countless factors. Patience here is not resignation, but respect for the complexity of another's path. By trusting the timing of others, you create space for genuine growth rather than forcing shallow compliance. Compassion deepens when you release the demand that others unfold according to your clock. The Dharma of timing also transforms how we handle disappointment. When plans fail or opportunities collapse, the mind often concludes that effort was wasted. But what if those events are simply causes that have not yet ripened? What if what looks like failure is only part of a longer chain that will bear fruit later? To trust timing is to resist the urge to declare final judgments about the value of an experience. Every event can become nourishment when understood as part of a larger unfolding. This teaching also cultivates humility. Our view of timing is often narrow, confined to immediate wants, but the universe operates on scales far larger than our personal desires. A tree may take decades to grow strong, an ecosystem centuries to balance, a culture generations to heal. To demand instant results is to mistake your limited view for the whole. Humility accepts that life's timing often exceeds what the individual can grasp. Trust is the willingness to participate without demanding to control the pace. Another dimension of this teaching is faith in resilience. Seeds do not always sprout in harsh soil, but they can lie dormant for years, waiting for the right conditions. In the same way, wisdom and compassion may seem buried in a person or community, but under the right circumstances, they emerge. This faith prevents despair, even when darkness appears overwhelming. You trust that no act of goodness is lost, that even if unseen now, its potential remains alive, waiting to ripen. This perspective also dissolves the anxiety of urgency. Modern life glorifies speed, demanding quick fixes and immediate gratification. But such urgency often leads to shallow solutions that collapse quickly. The Dharma of timing invites depth over speed. It teaches that the most enduring transformations take time: healing, forgiveness, insight, maturity. When you stop demanding instant results, you can focus on creating the right conditions and let time do its work. Trust grows as you learn that lasting change cannot be rushed. The Dharma of timing also applies to the path of practice itself. In meditation, the mind often wanders and progress feels elusive. But each moment of returning is a seed. Even when the mind feels restless, practice accumulates beneath the surface. Over months and years, the fruits become clear calm, clarity, compassion. To trust timing is to keep practicing without clinging to results, knowing that causes ripen when they are ready. The path unfolds through steady commitment, not instant breakthroughs. This teaching also reshapes how we view collective change. Social injustice, environmental crisis, and conflict often seem immovable. But history shows that conditions shift over time, often unpredictably. Movements that once seemed impossible eventually transform societies. Trust in the Dharma of timing means continuing to act with integrity, even when results are slow. Each effort contributes to conditions that may ripen in ways you cannot foresee. This perspective prevents despair and fuels perseverance. Patience in this sense is not passive waiting, it is active trust. A farmer does not plant seeds and sit idle. They water, tend, and protect the soil, knowing that growth takes time. In the same way, you cultivate wisdom, compassion, and presence daily, trusting that results will ripen naturally. This balance of effort and patience is the essence of the Dharma of timing, doing what you can without forcing what you cannot. Another gift of this teaching is peace with endings. Sometimes causes ripen into closure rather than continuation. A relationship ends, a season of life concludes, a dream dissolves. Instead of resisting, trust in timing allows you to accept endings as natural fruits of conditions. Just as leaves fall when their time is complete, aspects of life must pass to make room for new growth. This trust transforms grief into gratitude, allowing you to honor what was without clinging to what must pass. The Dharma of timing also helps free you from envy. When others succeed before you, the mind may burn with comparison. But trusting timing reminds you that everyone ripens at a different pace. Another's harvest does not diminish your own seeds. By respecting the rhythm of your life, you release the poison of envy and focus on cultivating your own conditions. Trust here is knowing that your path will unfold when the time is right, without needing to match anyone else's schedule. This perspective also brings wisdom to decision-making. Often people rush choices out of fear of missing out. But when you trust timing, you learn to pause, to let clarity ripen before acting. Some opportunities require patience to reveal their true nature. Acting too soon can distort outcomes, while waiting allows conditions to mature. Trusting the ripening of causes helps you act with precision rather than haste, aligning with the deeper rhythm of life. This teaching also illuminates forgiveness. Anger and resentment often feel impossible to release instantly, but forgiveness ripens over time as understanding deepens and the heart softens. Forcing it prematurely only leads to pretense. Trusting timing allows you to hold space for healing, knowing that even hardened hearts can soften when conditions mature. Patience with yourself and others is an act of compassion rooted in this trust. The Dharma of timing even applies to wisdom itself. Insights do not arrive on command. They ripen through experience, reflection, and openness. A teaching you hear today may not touch you deeply until years later, when life conditions make you ready to receive it. This is why the same words can suddenly feel profound at a different moment. Trusting timing allows you to remain open, knowing that wisdom comes when you are ready, not when you demand it. Finally, this teaching brings peace with mortality. Just as birth requires conditions, so does death. When life has ripened fully, death comes as part of the cycle. Trusting timing means accepting even this with dignity, knowing that the universe unfolds according to causes far greater than personal desire. Death is not a failure of timing, but its completion. Trust arises when you see it as part of the great rhythm, allowing you to live more fully while you are here. So as you rest with this truth, let go of the pressure to control the pace of your life. Seeds ripen when they are ready, not when impatience commands. Efforts bear fruit in their time, not always in your sight. The Dharma of timing is the wisdom of patience, the faith that unseen causes are always working, and the trust that nothing is wasted. By aligning with this rhythm, you free yourself from anxiety, cultivate resilience, and discover peace in the unfolding of life, exactly as it island. When you begin to understand the Dharma of timing, patience blossoms as trust in the natural ripening of causes. Yet even with patience, there is still a subtle thread that binds the heart, the attachment to outcomes. Waiting quietly for results is not the same as being free from needing those results to validate your life. True freedom comes when you release ownership over what happens, when your worth no longer depends on whether events unfold as you wished. This is the path of non-attachment, and it is one of the deepest expressions of faith in the universe. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean closing your heart or ceasing to care. Instead, it means participating fully while letting go of the demand to control results. You plant seeds, you nurture them with effort, but you release the need to claim the fruit as yours. This is faith at its purest, because it places trust not in outcomes, but in the act itself, in the living flow of the universe. At the root of attachment is the belief that outcomes define you. Success or failure becomes personal identity, gain or loss becomes proof of worth. This entanglement fuels anxiety and fear, because outcomes are never fully under your control. Even with effort, conditions beyond your reach shape what unfolds. Non-attachment recognizes this and frees you from bondage to results. When your identity no longer hinges on what happens, you act with clarity instead of desperation. This freedom transforms the way you engage with work. Many people pursue goals with clenched fists, measuring their value by achievements or recognition, but non-attachment shifts the focus to process. The meaning lies in showing up, in practicing integrity, in aligning with values. Whether others praise or criticize, whether results are visible or hidden, the act itself carries its own wholeness. Work becomes service rather than self-validation. Trust grows because you know that effort rooted in sincerity never goes to waste, even if outcomes differ from expectation. In relationships, attachment often appears as clinging to how others should act, speak, or feel. This clinging leads to disappointment, resentment, and control. Non-attachment honors connection without possession. It allows others to be free, to grow, to change, without making their choices a threat to your worth. Love deepens when it is freed from ownership. The heart opens more fully when it releases the illusion that another person can be held like an object. Trust here means believing that connection does not require control, that real intimacy thrives when space is allowed. Non-attachment also transforms how you meet suffering. Pain often multiplies because of clinging, the insistence that things should be other than they are. Loss is painful, but the refusal to let go of what is gone turns pain into prolonged suffering. When you practice non-attachment, you acknowledge grief without resistance. You allow endings to be what they are, trusting that new beginnings are always possible. Faith deepens when you realize that letting go does not mean emptiness, but space for renewal. This teaching also reshapes your relationship with possessions. Material attachment breeds insecurity, because no object can truly provide lasting security. Wealth may disappear, objects may decay, but clinging to them fuels fear of loss. Non-attachment allows you to use and enjoy what you have without mistaking it for identity or permanence. This does not mean rejecting possessions, but relating to them lightly. Ownership dissolves into stewardship, where you care for what is in your hands, but do not make it the anchor of your being. Trust grows when you discover that contentment arises from within, not from accumulation. Another subtle form of attachment is the craving for certainty. The mind wants to own the future, to guarantee outcomes, to hold life in predictable patterns, but the future cannot be possessed. Non-attachment here means releasing the demand for certainty and living with openness. You make plans, but you hold them lightly. You take steps, but you release the need for guarantees. Faith deepens when you see that the universe does not need to conform to your script in order for life to unfold meaningfully. Non-attachment also reveals a profound truth about identity. Much suffering comes from clinging to a fixed idea of self. I am this role, this status, this image. But the self is fluid, shaped by shifting conditions. When you cling to identity, you resist growth and change. Non-attachment allows the self to evolve freely. You no longer need to defend an image or control how others perceive you. Trust arises when you see that who you are is not a fixed possession, but an unfolding process, part of the larger flow of existence. This teaching also heals perfectionism. Perfectionism is attachment to flawless outcomes, the belief that only perfect results justify effort. But perfection is an illusion, and chasing it breeds exhaustion. Non-attachment releases this demand, allowing you to act sincerely without fear of imperfection. Mistakes become teachers rather than threats. Trust deepens when you see that growth matters more than flawlessness, and that even imperfect steps contribute to the whole. The practice of meditation offers direct training in non-attachment. Thoughts and sensations arise and pass, but clinging to them creates turbulence. When you notice a thought and let it go without chasing it, you practice releasing ownership. Over time, this habit spills into daily life. Emotions, outcomes, relationships, all can be met with openness rather than grasping. Meditation teaches the faith that life can unfold without the constant need to grasp and control. Non-attachment also transforms the experience of joy. Many people fear happiness because they cling to it, desperate to make it last. This clinging often shortens joy, turning it into anxiety about its end. But when you practice non-attachment, joy is savored in the moment, without demanding permanence. It becomes richer precisely because it is allowed to pass naturally. Trust grows when you see that joy will come again, that life continually offers new moments of sweetness without needing to freeze them. This perspective also dissolves envy and comparison. Attachment to outcomes fuels comparison. Why do they have what I don't? But non-attachment recognizes that each path unfolds according to unique conditions. You release the demand that your outcomes mirror another's. Instead, you focus on your own sincere participation. Trust arises when you stop competing with the universe and begin cooperating with it, accepting your path as sufficient. Non-attachment even applies to spiritual progress. Many seekers cling to milestones, to insights, to experiences of clarity. But clinging to spiritual achievements becomes another form of bondage. The moment you claim ownership, "I attained this, I am enlightened," the freshness disappears. Non-attachment means releasing even the desire to grasp awakening as a possession. Practice becomes an open path rather than a trophy case. Faith here is knowing that truth reveals itself not through clinging, but through surrender. This teaching also prepares you for mortality. The ultimate attachment is to life itself, to the body, to the sense of I. Death becomes terrifying when viewed as the loss of possession. But non-attachment reframes death as part of the universal flow. Life was never yours to own. It was always a gift, a process, a moment in the great unfolding. Trust grows when you release ownership even of existence, allowing yourself to rest in the larger continuity that transcends the individual. The practice of non-attachment also strengthens compassion. When you release the need to control outcomes, you can be present with others more fully. You help not to fix or possess, but simply to serve. This makes compassion lighter and more sustainable, free from frustration when results are slow or invisible. Trust deepens when you see that your role is to offer, not to own the fruit of offering. Another gift of this teaching is resilience. When you are attached to outcomes, setbacks crush you. When you release attachment, setbacks become opportunities to adapt. You trust that even when one path closes, others can open. This flexibility allows you to move through life without being broken by loss. Non-attachment is not detachment from life, but deeper engagement with its fluidity, rooted in trust that change always carries new possibilities. Non-attachment also aligns with generosity. When you give without attachment, you release the need for recognition or repayment. Giving becomes pure, a direct expression of compassion. The act itself is the reward. This purity builds trust, because you see that generosity is never wasted, that it nourishes both giver and receiver regardless of visible outcomes. This teaching is not easy, because attachment feels natural. But through practice, you discover that clinging is not security, but suffering. The hand that grips tightly becomes cramped. The hand that opens rests peacefully. Non-attachment is the open hand of faith, trusting that what comes is enough, what leaves makes space, and what remains is always sufficient. So let this truth rest in your heart. The purest faith is not in clinging to outcomes, but in releasing them. To live without ownership of results is to live free. You act sincerely, love deeply, give fully, and then let go. You trust that the universe, in its vastness, will carry each seed where it belongs. And in that release, you discover the quiet strength of a heart unbound. When non-attachment takes root, the heart becomes lighter, freer, and less bound by the weight of outcomes. Yet a deeper question begins to stir. What about the endless cycles of gain and loss, joy and sorrow, birth and death that still continue? Letting go softens suffering, but it does not erase the reality that life moves in circles. This is where the teaching of samsara enters, often misunderstood as a trap to be escaped. But in truth, samsara itself can be the greatest teacher when approached with trust. Instead of running from its cycles, you can discover wisdom within them. Samsara refers to the continual round of existence, shaped by ignorance, craving, and clinging. It is the repetition of patterns that create dissatisfaction, chasing what cannot last, resisting what cannot be avoided, clinging to what inevitably changes. Yet samsara is not an enemy imposed upon you. It is a mirror reflecting the habits of the mind. To see it as teacher means recognizing that every cycle of suffering carries within it the potential for awakening. The first lesson samsara teaches is the futility of grasping. Each time you cling to pleasure, it fades. Each time you chase achievement, the satisfaction is temporary. Each time you try to freeze life, it slips away. The repetition itself reveals the truth. Clinging cannot bring lasting peace. This recognition is not despair, but liberation. Samsara teaches through repetition what the mind refuses to accept. Nothing permanent can be grasped. And freedom comes only by letting go. The cycles of loss also teach resilience. Each ending, though painful, shows that life continues. A door closes, but breath still flows. The sun still rises, and new conditions emerge. Over time, these repetitions cultivate trust that even in the darkest moments, life carries renewal within itself. Samsara's cycles of birth and death remind us that nothing ends without also giving